In the quiet stillness of Chilota, Florida, where houses sit spaced apart on winding, tree-lined roads, the Amato home blended in like any other. A two-story suburban house with a manicured lawn and trimmed hedges, it didn't draw attention. But sometimes evil doesn't look like much on the surface. Sometimes it hides behind ordinary walls, in ordinary families, until it can no longer stay contained. That's exactly what happened inside this house, where a slow-burning storm was about to consume everything. The youngest of three boys, Grant Amato, had always felt a little different. His parents, Chad and Margaret, were known in the neighborhood as hardworking, respectable people. Chad was a sharp and strict professional, a pharmacist with high expectations and a no-nonsense attitude. Margaret, on the other hand, was kind, loving, and endlessly supportive of her sons. The eldest son, Cody, was the golden child, disciplined, successful, and admired. Grant, however, had trouble staying afloat. He was once a nursing student, once employed, once trusted, until that trust slowly slipped through his fingers. In 2018, things began to fall apart. Grant was fired from his job as a nurse for stealing propofol, a dangerous anesthetic, and his license was suspended. With no career and no clear path forward, he moved back in with his parents. But while the world expected him to get back on track, Grant slipped into something far more dangerous than unemployment. He slipped into obsession. He discovered a website where cam models performed live shows for online viewers, and he quickly became obsessed with one woman in particular, Sylvie, a model from Bulgaria. She wasn't just entertainment to him, she became an escape, a fantasy, and in Grant's world, she became real. He began spending thousands of dollars on Sylvie. He sent her lavish gifts, paid for private shows, and lied to her about who he was. He told her he was rich, successful, and free to travel. But he wasn't. He was unemployed, broke, and living under his father's roof. As his lies grew, so did his desperation. He began stealing money from his brother Cody, who was living at home while working as a nurse. Then he turned to his parents' savings. Over time, more than $200,000 vanished. And when the truth came out, the entire Amato household exploded with confrontation and heartbreak. His parents were devastated. His father gave him an ultimatum: go to rehab and cut off contact with Sylvie, or leave. Grant reluctantly agreed and spent 60 days in internet rehab. For a brief moment, it looked like he might change. But when he returned, nothing had improved. His parents set strict rules. No computers, no lies, no Sylvie. But Grant couldn't let go. He found ways to access the internet. He resumed contact with Sylvie, and the fantasy world pulled him in again, even deeper. By January 2019, the family was unraveling. Cody, the brother who had once stood by Grant, was now furious. Margaret, their mother, tried to hold on to her youngest son, but her strength was fading. Chad was done. He demanded Grant leave for good. And on January 24th, 2019, Grant packed a bag, walked out the door, and disappeared into the night. But what no one knew, what no one could have imagined, was that Grant wasn't just walking away. He was preparing to return. And when he did, everything would change forever. The early morning of January 25th, 2019, arrived cold and still in the quiet neighborhood of Chilota. No one heard the sounds. No one saw the signs. Inside the Amato home, silence hung like a heavy curtain. Cody hadn't shown up to work. Margaret hadn't answered her phone. Chad wasn't responding to messages. It was unlike all of them. Friends grew concerned. Co-workers grew suspicious. And as the day dragged on, so did the tension. Something wasn't right. When law enforcement entered the Amato residence, they were met with an eerie calm. Nothing seemed ransacked. No doors were forced open, but the deeper they stepped inside, the clearer it became. In the kitchen, Margaret Amato was found lying face down on the floor, a gunshot wound to her head. In a nearby office, Chad was slumped in a chair, executed in a similar fashion. And upstairs, Cody, the beloved brother who had always supported Grant, was discovered sprawled on the floor, lifeless, blood pooling beneath him. Each shot was calculated, clean, cold. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no missing valuables. Whoever did this knew the house, knew the layout, knew the victims, and more importantly, the house alarm had been disabled. When police reviewed the home's surveillance footage, they found something chilling. Around midnight the night before, the cameras had gone black, unplugged, and the only person unaccounted for was Grant Amato. At first, no one could believe it. Grant had no history of violence. He was awkward, socially distant, emotionally off. But a killer? Police tracked him to a hotel in Orange County where he'd been staying using his father's credit card. When they found him, Grant was calm, almost too calm. He told officers he had gone to meet a friend and didn't know what had happened to his family. He showed no emotion, no panic, no sorrow, just a dull emptiness. As investigators questioned him, the lies began to unravel. They found online chats where Grant continued to talk to Sylvie even after his family's murder. In fact, just hours after the murders, he was sending her messages and photos. The money trail showed he had been trying to send her more cash. His internet history showed searches about how to commit murder, how to cover tracks, how to disable security systems, and in his hotel room, they found gunshot residue on his hands. But Grant never confessed. He maintained he had nothing to do with it. He said he left the house before midnight, that someone else must have done it, but with no signs of a break-in, no missing items, no other suspects, and no alibi. The case against him grew stronger by the hour. What drove someone to kill their entire family? What pushes a person from fantasy into irreversible reality? For Grant, it was obsession, the kind that blurs lines between fiction and truth, between love and illusion, between family and fatal betrayal. As the days unfolded, the truth surrounding the Amato murders became darker. Investigators painted a haunting picture, one of a man so deeply consumed by delusion that he would trade the lives of those who loved him for a woman he had never even met in person. Grant's obsession with Sylvie wasn't just a passing phase. It had evolved into a fantasy world where he believed he was the hero, the provider, the one in control. But reality kept crashing in. His job was gone, his savings depleted, his family losing trust. The only way he saw forward was to remove the obstacles. In his mind, his family had become enemies to his happiness. At the heart of it was Cody, the one who never gave up on Grant, even when the rest of the family started losing patience. Cody paid for Grant's expenses, stood up for him, helped him avoid jail time, and even gave him a second chance. But Grant didn't see that. He saw betrayal, because even Cody had started drawing boundaries. And Grant, emotionally detached and increasingly erratic, saw that as a threat to his dream. On the night of January 24th, the timeline began to take shape. Surveillance footage showed Grant at the house late into the night. At some point, the cameras went dark, unplugged by hand. The murders likely happened shortly after. Based on the evidence and autopsy reports, each victim was killed swiftly, one after another. No screams, no calls for help. It was as if they never saw it coming. Grant's internet search history before and after the murders showed a mind in full control of his actions. He researched how to make it look like a suicide. He read about how police track suspects. He even looked up how to avoid getting caught after a homicide. And the most unsettling part, after killing his family, he sat down, cleaned himself up, and resumed chatting with Sylvie as if nothing had happened. In his messages to her, he played the victim. He said he had been betrayed by his family, that he had lost everything, that he would now be free to be with her. But Sylvie never responded the way he hoped. She didn't offer love or comfort. She grew distant. Perhaps even she sensed something chilling behind his words. By the time police arrested him, Grant seemed to have convinced himself that he was innocent, or at least he wanted to believe it. In interviews, he spoke in circles, avoided direct answers, and blamed others. But the evidence was damning. Surveillance, gun residue, credit card theft, inconsistent timelines. Everything pointed to him. And yet not a single tear was shed, not a single moment of visible grief, just a cold, detached stare. The trial was inevitable, but the pain it brought to those who knew the Amatos, neighbors, friends, co-workers, was immeasurable. A family destroyed not by strangers or a random tragedy, but by one of their own. A son, a brother, the one they tried so hard to protect. The courtroom was heavy with silence the day Grant Amato stood trial. No outbursts, no visible remorse. Just a blank face that once belonged to a son, a brother, now a man accused of wiping out his entire bloodline. The prosecution didn't need theatrics. They had a timeline, digital footprints, ballistics, financial records, surveillance footage, and motive. And the motive wasn't just shocking, it was grotesque in its simplicity. Grant murdered his family over a fantasy. Not for money, not for revenge, but to continue talking to a woman who didn't even know the truth about him. What haunted everyone in that courtroom wasn't just the horror of the act, but the coldness behind it. Grant never cried for his parents. He never asked about Cody. He never acknowledged the lives he ended. Instead, he sat there, calm, composed, sometimes even annoyed, as if all this was a distraction from the life he still hoped to live online. The defense tried to spin a tale of mental instability, of a troubled young man pushed to the edge. But the evidence contradicted it all. This wasn't an impulsive act, it was calculated. He had studied crime, erased surveillance, crafted a cover story, and fled with stolen items, even parked away from security cameras. Every move was deliberate. When he left the bodies behind in cold silence, he didn't go into hiding. He went back to the one place that made him feel seen, the internet cafe, where Sylvie awaited his return. Unaware that she had become the center of a blood-soaked fantasy, when the jury returned, the verdict was swift and unanimous. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder. The penalty? Life in prison? No parole. And yet, when the sentence was read, Grant barely blinked. No emotion. As if the reality still hadn't reached him. Or maybe he had already left it behind, still dreaming of a digital world that would never judge him the way the real one did. The house on Sultan Circle was never the same. Neighbors stopped walking near it. The lights stayed off. The grass grew tall. It stood like a haunted shell, not just of brick and wood, but of trust shattered beyond repair. 3 lives lost, a legacy burned. And for what? A digital illusion wrapped in loneliness and entitlement. Many still ask, could this have been stopped? Could someone have done more? But the truth is, the Amato family tried. They gave Grant every chance. They forgave. They hoped. They waited for change. But in the end, they were devoured by the very love they kept giving. And Sylvie? She vanished from the web, deleted her accounts, disconnected. Perhaps she too realized how close she came to being drawn into something horrific. She was never to blame, but she became the mirror that reflected just how deep someone could fall when fantasy replaces humanity. If you want to know the full depth of this heartbreaking story, the complete documentary is now live on Stories. Go watch it and see how far a lie can go when love